3 years ago, I was sitting alone on the porch of my old apartment, holding a cup of now cold tea in my hands, feeling this strange emptiness. Like despite everything I'd lived through, none of it had ever really been real. I had just ended yet another relationship that had promised so much and ended like all the others, with silence, subtle hurt, and that unsettling feeling that once again, I just hadn't been enough. I already knew the script by heart. It always started with excitement, late-night talks, promises of forever, and ended with vague distance, buried insecurities, and a meaningless fight that masked much deeper wounds. That evening, I pulled out an old box from my closet. Inside were letters from past boyfriends, birthday notes, movie ticket stubs, and at the very bottom, an old photo album. Flipping through it felt like falling into a mirror. Each page revealed a face, a stiff smile, eyes silently pleading for something I couldn't name. And then I saw her. Little me. It was a photo of me at 7, sitting on my mom's lap, grinning while she stared blankly into the distance, eyes tired. My dad stood off to the side holding a coffee mug. What struck me was the space between them. That one photo said so much. Said everything. I'd grown up in a home where love was implied, but never spoken, where fights were suppressed and long silences were mistaken for peace. And in that moment, with a knot in my throat, I realized I had spent my adult life trying to recreate what I thought love was, something distant, difficult, that required constant effort just to be noticed. A name floated to mind. Daniel. I was 22 when I dated him, my first, almost. We almost got married. Almost found happiness. Almost built a life together. I remember one particular rainy night when he looked me in the eyes and said, "You're everything I want, just not right now." And I stayed. I stayed for 2 more years, trying to be his now. Shrinking myself. Swallowing my needs. Losing myself. Then came Lucas. With him, I learned intensity. In the beginning, he made me feel like the only woman in the world. He said he'd never met anyone like me. Until the day he disappeared for 3 days without explanation. When he came back, he offered a half-hearted excuse and a wilted flower. And I accepted it. Because I thought love meant enduring. Pushing through. Paying the price. With each new relationship, I believed I was getting closer to the one. But looking back at that album, I realized I had only been drifting further and further away from myself. That was the moment something broke inside me. But it was also the moment something new began. Because for the first time I asked myself, what if the love of my life is me? That night felt different. Different because, for the first time, I didn't call a friend. I didn't scroll through social media. I didn't ask for advice or vent in the group chat. I just sat there, on the floor of my living room, back against the cold wall, with a half-finished glass of wine and an old notebook I barely used. And I wrote. I wrote with no filter. No need to make it pretty. I just let the words spill out. Why do I always feel like I'm not enough? Why do I have to shrink myself to be loved? Why does other people's silence hurt more than my own loneliness? My hand trembled. The wine sat forgotten. It was like my soul had been waiting years to finally speak. By the time the sun began to rise, the pages were filled with scribbles, crossed out lines, emotional confessions. And one single sentence stood out, written in bold, shaky letters. The problem isn't them. It's me. Not as the villain, but as the origin. That was it. It wasn't about blaming myself. It was about taking responsibility. Somewhere deep down, I realized I hadn't been unlucky in love. I had been making choices, conscious and unconscious, that mirrored the way I saw myself. I was attracting the kind of love I secretly believed I deserved. And worse, I was recreating the emotional blueprint of my childhood home without even knowing it. The next morning, I called my therapist. I told her everything about the night I had, the things I wrote. She listened in that calm way of hers and then said, "Mariana, this might be the most honest moment you've ever had with yourself." We began a new phase in our sessions. Not focused on exes. Not on what they did or didn't do. But on me. On what I believed about love, about worth, about what it meant to be chosen. And every week, I uncovered something new. Like the day I realized I'd always tied love to approval, that growing up, I thought affection was something you earned by being good. Or the day I remembered hiding in the school bathroom crying after a boy said, "You're too pretty to be cool." Since then, I'd carried this idea that I had to choose, to either be admired or respected, never both. Each memory felt like a weight, but also like a piece of the puzzle finally falling into place. My therapist introduced something she called emotional excavation. Every day I wrote. Sometimes a memory, sometimes a fear, sometimes a quote that had stuck with me for no reason at all. Each word peeled back a layer of armor I hadn't realized I was wearing. One afternoon, while walking through the park, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. An elderly man was pushing his wife in a wheelchair. They were laughing. Not in that exaggerated movie way, but in that small, private way you laugh when you've shared a lifetime together. Their joy was gentle, unforced, real. I stood there, heart in my throat, and out loud, without even meaning to, I asked, "Do I actually believe this is possible for me?" The answer came quiet and clear, "Not yet. But I want to start believing." That night, I went home and opened my notebook. On a fresh page, I wrote, "Starting today, I choose to prepare for the love I truly deserve." I didn't know what that meant yet, but I knew one thing. It was the beginning. Transformation is a beautiful word, but no one talks about what it actually takes. In movies, awakenings come with inspiring music and clear, bold decisions. In real life, they come quietly, alone, and full of setbacks. I learned that when I decided to truly transform my relationship with myself. It was a cloudy Saturday when I began the most uncomfortable and most revealing exercise of all, writing down every single belief I had about love. I sat with my notebook and just wrote. No editing, no judgment. The thoughts poured out like they'd been waiting for years. Interesting men always prefer younger women. Every relationship eventually gets boring. If I'm not always available, he'll lose interest. Being too emotional scares people. The ones who love you always leave. When I finished, I stared at the list in shock. That was it. My relationship map. A blueprint of everything I had unconsciously believed and lived out over and over. Each belief had been a seed, and I had watered them unknowingly with every decision I made. What hurt the most? Realizing I had looked for relationships that confirmed those beliefs. Over and over again. The mind wants to be right, my therapist said during our next session. Even if being right means getting hurt. She gave me a challenge. For every limiting belief, write a new one. Not something wildly idealistic, something that felt possible, even if just a little. So I began, I am lovable exactly as I am. Love can deepen over time. I deserve stable, mutual affection. My emotional depth is a gift. The right person stays. It felt awkward at first, like trying to speak a foreign language. I repeated those affirmations to myself in the mirror and wanted to laugh, or cry, or run. But I kept going, every day, like I was planting something new in soil that had long been dry. And slowly, life started to test me. A few days into this new practice, I bumped into an ex Bruno at a cafe. He looked even better than I remembered. Charming, smooth, confident. Within minutes, he was dropping flirty hints. For a moment, I slipped back into that version of me who just wanted to be wanted. But something had shifted. When he said, "We should catch up sometime, no pressure," I smiled and replied, "I'm not doing pressureless anymore. I want something with intention." Bruno laughed awkwardly. I left. And it was only in the silence of my car afterward that it hit me. That was my first real win. Not over him. Over my old self. Of course, healing isn't linear. A few weeks later, I found myself alone on a Friday night, tipsy from too much wine, scrolling through old photos. I missed someone. Anyone. I hovered over the send button on a message to a toxic ex, just to feel something familiar. I didn't send it, but I cried. Hard. That night, I wrote a letter, not to anyone in particular, but to all my exes. I said everything I'd never had the chance to say. I apologized for betraying myself in order to be loved. I thanked them for the lessons. I released the pain. One line nearly broke me to write. "Thank you for leaving. If you hadn't, I never would have found my way back to myself. A few days later, I burned the letter in my parents' backyard. I stood there, watching the ash rise, heart pounding. It was symbolic, but it felt real. And the shifts kept coming, quietly. A friend commented that I looked lighter. A coworker said they felt more present energy when I talked. I found myself unbothered by things that used to trigger me. But the most curious shift of all came in a dream. I dreamt of a house by the ocean. It sat alone on a cliff. Its door was open. Inside, there was soft light and music, the smell of fresh coffee. I walked in, and a voice calm but clear said, "He's already on his way. But you still need to meet your courage one more time." I woke up crying but strangely calm. That morning, I created my first vision board. I cut out images that represented not just a relationship, but the feeling of it. Intertwined hands. An older couple laughing on a park bench. A woman sitting with her eyes closed in complete peace. At the center, I glued a lighthouse. I didn't know why. It just felt right. Safe. Guiding. Steady. Beside it, I wrote a letter to the love of my life. It wasn't about looks or surface traits. It was about how we'd speak to each other. How we'd handle disagreements. How we'd make each other better. That night, I slid the letter under my pillow and slept with a smile. For the first time, I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I was preparing, not to find love, but to live it. The days following the creation of my vision board came with a new energy. It felt like, by declaring to the universe and to myself that I was ready for true love, something inside me began to shift. But no, it didn't come with a magical sign. There was no surprise phone call. No text from a long-lost love. No sudden burst of synchronicity. What came was silence. And that's when the real challenge began. At first, I thought maybe I was doing something wrong. I was meditating, visualizing, repeating affirmations, journaling like clockwork, but the outside world looked exactly the same. Each morning, I tried to feel love as if it were already here. I'd sit quietly, close my eyes, and imagine a hand held gently in mine, laughter shared on a lazy Saturday afternoon, a look that said, "I see all of you, and I still choose you." In the beginning, it was hard to concentrate. A voice in the back of my mind would whisper, "You're just pretending. This is make-believe." But I kept going. I started waking up 15 minutes earlier every day just to do this practice, not because I fully believed it would change anything, but because something deep inside me needed it. I needed to reconnect with the possibility, with hope, with myself. I also rewrote and refined the letter I'd written to my future partner, adding the kind of details I had never thought to include. How he dealt with frustration, how he made me feel safe even when we weren't speaking, how he shared silly inside jokes that made even the worst days bearable. More than a wish list, it became a mirror, a reflection of the woman I was becoming. Then one morning, I did something a little strange. I walked into my bedroom, opened my closet, and cleared half of it. I folded my clothes carefully and made space, as if someone else was coming. I moved the chair from the corner and created room for a second nightstand. I bought 2 matching coffee mugs and placed one on the drying rack. Small gestures, but they sent a message to my subconscious. I'm ready. I also started sleeping on the same side of the bed every night. Little by little, every action became a conversation with the future I was building. And the more I acted as if, the more I started feeling different, lighter, more hopeful, more whole. Still, the doubts came. Friends began getting engaged. Pregnancy announcements popped up on Instagram. One friend, who had always said she didn't believe in love, suddenly got married in 6 months. I smiled for the pictures, but inside, I felt that familiar ache. That night, in a moment of quiet frustration, I tore down the vision board I'd worked so hard on. "This isn't working," I said out loud. "Maybe I've just been lying to myself." I sat on the edge of my bed, eyes blurry, wondering if I should just give up. And then my phone buzzed. A message from my therapist. Quite random. Out of nowhere. Just one line. "Remember, the seed doesn't stop growing just because it's under the soil." I read it. I wept. And I rebuilt the board. This time, I didn't just look at the images. I felt them. When I saw the older couple walking hand in hand, I imagined their story. When I saw the cozy home, I imagined Sunday mornings with pancakes and laughter. I let the emotions rush through me like waves. I smiled. I cried. I allowed myself to believe again. And something shifted, not outside, but inside. One afternoon on the subway, I saw a couple in their 70s holding hands and laughing. But this time, I didn't feel envy. I felt faith. That same week, a stranger smiled at me on the street. I smiled back, without expectation, just presence. I started writing down every small moment that felt like alignment in what I called my proof journal. A sweet compliment, a vivid dream, an unexpected connection. They were breadcrumbs, reminders that even if nothing looked different yet, something was happening. And I noticed something else too. My patterns were changing. I went on a date with a man I would have entertained before, just to see what happens. But this time, 20 minutes in, I knew. He wasn't what I wanted. I said goodbye with kindness and clarity. And on the cab ride home, I felt something new, not rejection. Relief. That was the new version of me, fully alive. A woman who didn't just want someone. She wanted the right kind of connection. One rooted in truth, not fear. The practice of visualizing no longer felt like an effort. It became a gift. A way to come home to myself. A way to remember what I was worthy of, every single day. And while I didn't know when or how or where, in my soul I knew. He was coming. The weeks that followed felt lighter. I was walking differently, holding eye contact longer, smiling more. And maybe most importantly, I was saying no without guilt. I started going to places that felt like me. No more noisy bars or forced dating apps. I went back to the things that made my soul feel alive. Poetry readings, weekend hikes, afternoons in cozy cafes with jazz in the background and a book in my hand. That's where I met Marcelo. It was at a book signing event for an author I admired. He was polite, articulate, and warm. His eyes were soft, and he had a way of telling stories that made me laugh out loud, something I hadn't done on a date in ages. After the event, he invited me for coffee. I said yes. We talked for hours. He spoke about his passion for travel, his work with education, and his love for poetry. And I felt something I hadn't in a long time seen. Admired. Even adored. The following days were a blur of flowers, thoughtful texts, and dinners at quiet restaurants. Just the way I liked. A part of me began to wonder, could he be the one? But something was off. Marcelo talked a lot, but he rarely listened. Our conversations felt like performances, him center stage, me clapping politely from the front row. He avoided deeper questions, dodged anything that made him uncomfortable, dismissed feelings with rehearsed charm, and I knew deep down what the old me would have done. She would have rationalized it, overlooked the red flags, tried to be easygoing, tried to be enough, but I wasn't her anymore. One night, after I told him I needed time alone to recharge, he showed up unannounced at my door, flowers in hand, smile on his face. It wasn't romantic. It was invasive. And I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear, but clarity. My body remembered. I sat across from him at dinner, and somewhere between the wine and the dessert, he looked at me and said, "I really like you. But you're a little too intense sometimes." And just like that, something inside me clicked. Before, that sentence would have shattered me. I would have softened, apologized, twisted myself into something more manageable. But not this time. I took a deep breath and smiled, not with bitterness, but with certainty. Or maybe I've just finally learned what I deserve. That was the last time I saw him. He texted a few more times after that. But I knew, with every fiber of my being, that door was meant to stay closed. The following days were quiet. But it was a different kind of quiet, not the empty kind. The cleared out kind. Like space had been made. Like something new was getting ready to arrive. I found myself dancing in the kitchen again. Laughing alone. Buying myself flowers. Watching old movies that made me cry. And letting myself cry. I felt whole. Then the final test came. A message from an ex. The ex. The one I used to think was the one that got away. He said he missed me. Said he'd changed. Said he wanted to talk. My heart raced. My mind began to spiral. Could people change? Was this a sign? He asked to meet. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. That night, I sat on the couch and reread the letter I had written to the love of my life. It was simple, heartfelt. I remembered one line I'd written. I want someone I can grow with, not someone who drags me back to who I used to be. I picked up my phone and replied, I hope you're well, but I'm not the woman you used to know. And that's a good thing. I hit send, blocked the number, took a deep breath, and in that moment, I realized something powerful. My greatest manifestation wasn't my partner. It was me. The version of me that no longer made decisions out of fear. The version of me that responded from self-worth instead of desperation. And when you start making choices rooted in love instead of lack, the universe pays attention. Things begin to align. Quietly. Seamlessly. I didn't know it yet, but he was just around the corner. It was a regular Thursday. I had just finished a long day at work, and instead of heading straight home, I stopped by a little neighborhood bookstore I loved. A quiet, tucked-away place where time always seemed to slow down. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. Just something to clear my head. I wandered into the philosophy section, reached for a book, and so did someone else. Our hands touched. Sorry, we said at the exact same time, then laughed. That laugh. It was soft. Sincere. Unforced. He smiled and gently pulled back. You go ahead, he said. No, it's okay, I replied. I was just curious about the title. Our eyes met, and lingered just a little longer than expected. That was him. Raphael. Tall, calm, with kind eyes and an almost unshakable stillness. Not still like stuck, but like grounded. Present. Real. We stood there between the shelves, talking about the book. Then about others. And suddenly, we were sitting in the store cafe with 2 cups of coffee, deep into a conversation that felt like it had started long before we met. He told me about his divorce, the solo trip he took afterward, the way he needed silence to figure out who he really was outside of a relationship. I told him about my journey with manifestation, my vision board, my inner work. And to my surprise, it didn't feel like oversharing. It felt natural. 3 hours passed in what felt like 20 minutes. As we said goodbye, we exchanged numbers. And before he walked out, he said something that would stay with me for days. It was good to meet you like this, when I wasn't expecting anything. In the days that followed, our texts were easy. No games. No weird gaps in communication. Just consistency. Warmth. Intention. On our second date, he brought me a book and a flower he had picked from his mother's garden. It was such a simple gesture, and it undid me. But along with the sweetness came the fear. By the 3rd week, I noticed myself getting anxious. Not in a butterflies kind of way, in an old fear kind of way. What if I ruin it? What if he leaves too? I started second-guessing myself, holding back parts of who I was, trying to seem more chill, more low maintenance. And one night, after a beautiful evening together, I got home and cried. Because love, real love, was scarier than I thought. I brought it up in therapy. I'm scared. What if I'm projecting? What if I'm getting it all wrong again? My therapist looked at me, calm as ever. When you've known pain for a long time, your brain learns to treat the familiar, even if it's painful, as safe. But maybe it's time to let yourself receive. That's when I realized the work now wasn't attracting love. It was not running from it. So I started practicing in small ways. Saying when I missed him. Texting first without overthinking it. Telling him when I was scared. Laughing fully. Being fully me. Raphael met me with the same openness. The same calm. When I told him about my past patterns, he listened without flinching. And then he said, I'm still learning too. But I'd like to learn with you, if you're open to it. It felt like my heart took a deep breath. Then something strange happened. One afternoon, we were talking about our neighborhoods and realized Raphael had lived just 3 blocks from my apartment. 4 years. We had gone to the same cafes, the same farmer's market, the same park. And yet, we'd never met. We sat there in stunned silence for a moment. Then he smiled and said, Maybe we only crossed paths when we were finally ready. I felt tears sting my eyes, because I knew he was right. The final confirmation came a few weeks later, when we were packing up some of his things to move into my place. He opened a box filled with postcards and pulled one out. I froze. It was the exact same image I had placed at the center of my vision board. A lighthouse by the sea. Soft purple skies. Gentle waves. "This one always kept me grounded," he said. "I've had it for years." That night, I showed him my vision board. He looked at it, eyes wide but soft, and then said something I'll never forget. "I made a list too. A few years ago, after everything fell apart. A list of things I wanted in a partner. And you're basically all of it." We sat in silence. Not awkward, just full. Like something sacred had unfolded between us. And that's when I realized. I wasn't repeating old patterns. I wasn't clinging or chasing. I was choosing. Consciously. Lovingly. That's when it truly hit me. The law of attraction didn't give me Raphael like some prize. It had prepared me to recognize him. If I had met him a year earlier, I wouldn't have been ready. I would have doubted. I would have sabotaged. I would have run. But now, I could choose him. With clarity. With peace. With an open heart. That same week, we had our first real argument. It was about something small, a weekend trip I wanted to take, but he had a packed work schedule. I felt frustrated. He felt cornered. Before, I would have swallowed the discomfort to keep the peace. But not this time. I spoke up. Calmly. Clearly. Kindly. "I just want to feel like I matter in your plans. Like my wants are part of this too." He paused. Looked me in the eyes. "Thank you for telling me that. I'm still learning how to sit with discomfort without shutting down." That conversation changed us. After that, our communication deepened. We began doing small gratitude practices together. Morning visualizations. Sunday check-ins. We weren't perfect, but we were intentional. We started visualizing our life together. Not what we wanted from each other, but what we wanted to build together. And then, the synchronicities started coming faster. We discovered that our mothers had worked in the same office building for years. That we had both attended the same spiritual retreat, 3 months apart. That we had stood in the same room at an art exhibit on the same day, without ever crossing paths. Coincidence? Maybe. But after everything I'd lived through, I prefer to call it alignment. Because when you begin living in alignment with your truth, and more importantly, with what you believe you deserve, the universe starts orchestrating things in ways that logic can't explain. Even so, it wasn't perfect. There were hard days, emotional triggers, patterns from the past trying to creep back in. But now, I understood something I never had before. Love doesn't mean never messing up. It means choosing to stay in it every day, even when it's uncomfortable. And Raphael, he chose me. Not because he needed to. Because he wanted to. I'm writing this tonight with Raphael sleeping beside me. The soft glow of the bedside lamp lets me see his peaceful face. He shifts slightly, gently holds my hand, like even in sleep, he knows I'm here. And in this quiet filled with presence, I finally understand everything. The woman who used to beg the universe for a miracle, who scanned the world for signs and questioned her own worth with every unanswered text, she's still a part of me. But now she knows. The most powerful signs aren't loud. They don't come with fireworks. They come with peace. Because the love you manifest isn't something that comes to fill you. It comes to walk beside you. I used to think I needed someone to complete me. Today, I understand that real love is the kind that joins a whole person, not to fix her, not to save her, but to honor who she's become. The law of attraction isn't about controlling the outside world. It's about transforming your inner world until it aligns with what you say you want. You don't just attract what you desire. You attract what you believe you deserve. And most importantly, what you are ready to receive. Maybe you're listening to this now with a lump in your throat. Maybe you're exactly where I was 3 years ago. Tired, doubting, wondering if it's too late. Let me tell you, soul to soul, it's not. The love you're searching for is also searching for you. But first, like I discovered, you may need to meet yourself. My journey didn't begin when Raphael walked into that bookstore. It began the night I stopped looking outward and started listening inward. When I turned silence into space, pain into wisdom, loneliness into presence, stillness into vision. And now, 2 years later, when I wake up next to Raphael and feel that quiet sense of safety and belonging, I don't think I finally got what I wanted. I think I became the woman who could receive this kind of love. Because the truth is, the version of me who begged for love wouldn't have recognized Raphael. She would have chased him away, or lost herself trying to keep him. But the woman I became, the woman who chose healing, wholeness, boundaries, and belief. She didn't wait for love. She prepared for it. So if there's one truth I can leave with you, let it be this. You are worthy of a love that sees your light and embraces your shadows. A love that doesn't arrive to rescue you, but to walk with you while you rise. And that kind of love? It's real. It's possible. It's coming. The only question is, are you becoming the person who can meet it, hold it, and grow with it? That choice is yours. And the time to begin is now. If you felt inspired by this story, like this video and subscribe to the channel to follow more stories like this. Thank you so much for watching.